Hello, everyone. I am Davide Prete. Welcome to the first lecture about public art. Today, we begin the course by grounding ourselves in what public art actually is, not just as objects in space, but as a system involving funding, politics, communities, artists, and public life. Public art is everywhere around us. Murals, sculptures, artist designed benches, lighting, floors, digital installations, many of which are funded through government programs, especially Percent for Art initiatives. What's important to understand from the start is that public art is not accidental. It's structured, intentional, and increasingly professionalized. Over the last few decades, public art has expanded dramatically in scale, complexity, and expectation. It's no longer just about making something visually appealing, it's about responding to place, people, and social context. This course will treat public art as an interdisciplinary practice that lies at the intersection of art, architecture, urban planning, and social engagement. This lesson will give you the conceptual foundation for everything we'll do this semester. Public art is defined less by what it looks like and more by where it exists and who it serves. It's art located in spaces that are publicly accessible: plazas, streets, transit systems, libraries, parks, and often funded by public money. Because of that, public art carries a different kind of responsibility than studio work. Unlike gallery art, public art doesn't assume a self selected audience. People encounter it while commuting, working, shopping, or living their daily lives. This means the artist must think about visibility, durability, safety, accessibility, and interpretation. Public art can be permanent or temporary, monumental or subtle, physical or digital, but it always exists within a shared civic space. One key takeaway from Chapter 1 is that public art is increasingly expected to engage, not just decorate. It asks artists to consider how work interacts with everyday life rather than existing apart from it. Public art has grown enormously over the last few decades, largely due to Percent for Art programs. These programs typically allocate between 0.5% and 2% of public construction budgets to art, with 1% being the most common. What's striking is not just the amount of funding, but the expansion of who administers it. Originally, public art programs were almost entirely government run. Today, many are managed by nonprofits, foundations, and hybrid organizations. Calls for artists now flow through platforms like Cafe, with millions of dollars circulating annually. This growth reflects a cultural shift. Public art is no longer seen as optional, but as an expected feature of civic development. For artists, this means opportunity, but also competition, accountability, and professional standards. Understanding this ecosystem is essential if you want to work in public space. Historically, public art followed a monument model: statues on pedestals, symbolic objects meant to be observed from a distance. This model has been disrupted by community based practices, social intervention, and participatory art. Today, public art is less about commemoration and more about activation. Artists are often asked to collaborate with communities, respond to local histories, and create work that invites interaction or dialogue. This doesn't mean monuments no longer exist, but it does mean they are no longer the default. The shift toward engagement also reflects broader social movements, questioning who gets represented in public space, whose stories are told, and who has a voice in shaping the built environment. Public art has become a site of negotiation rather than authority, One of the most important developments, the rise of the embedded artist. These are artists in residence within city departments of transportation, sanitation, water utilities, planning, who work from inside systems rather than responding from outside. Instead of being brought in at the end to add art, embedded artists help rethink how systems communicate, serve, and connect with the public. This model positions artists as problem solvers, translators, and collaborators. The embedded artist challenges the idea of the solitary genius and replaces it with a model where creativity is distributed, relational, and embedded in civic life. This approach aligns strongly with interdisciplinary practice and social engagement. We need to discuss how digital technology has reshaped public art, though not always as early theorists predicted. Instead of replacing physical space, digital tools now enhance site-specific work through LEDs, projection mapping, fabrication technologies, and interactive systems. Social media has introduced a new layer of public engagement. Artworks now function as backdrops for selfies, shared images, and location-based identity. This means artists must consider how work circulates beyond the site itself. The concept of the networked commons expands public space beyond geography into shared interests and digital communities. Public art today exists simultaneously in physical and virtual space. A critical question is, why do governments fund something as controversial as art? One answer is economic. Cities compete to attract the creative class, workers in technology, culture, and innovation, and public art signals civic vitality and openness. Public art is also a tool for placemaking. It helps distinguish cities, humanize infrastructure, and create identity. While the benefits of art are difficult to measure directly, governments justify funding through aggregate economic impact, tourism, and quality of life metrics. Importantly, public art funding is not charity, it's public investment. Understanding this mindset is crucial for artists navigating public commissions. Americans for the Arts identifies 5 major reasons public art matters: economic growth, cultural identity, artists as contributors, social cohesion, and public health. Together, these form a powerful framework for understanding public value. Public art supports local economies, strengthens community attachment, and validates artists as essential contributors. It also fosters cultural understanding and social connection, particularly across differences. Less obviously, public art impacts mental health by reducing stress, encouraging movement, and creating moments of reflection. These benefits may be indirect, but they are deeply felt in daily life. Millennium Park in Chicago is a landmark example of public art's economic impact. Anchored by works like Anish Kapoor's Cloud Gate and Jaume Plenza's Crown Fountain, the park transformed the city's global image. What's remarkable is how drastically projections underestimated its success. Visitor numbers and economic impact exceeded expectations by orders of magnitude. The park spurred a real estate development, tourism, and long-term investment. However, it's also important to note that Millennium Park was not created through a traditional percent for art model. It relied heavily on private funding and invited artists. This raises questions about access, authorship, and models of public art delivery. Millennium Park in Chicago is a landmark example of public art's economic impact. Anchored by works like Anish Kapoor's Cloud Gate, and Jaume Plenza's Crown Fountain, the park transformed the city's global image. What's remarkable is how drastically projections underestimated its success. Visitor numbers and economic impact exceeded expectations by orders of magnitude. The park spurred a real estate development, tourism, and long-term investment. However, it's also important to note that Millennium Park was not created through a traditional percent for art model. It relied heavily on private funding and invited artists. This raises questions about access, authorship, and models of public art delivery. In studio practice, artists work autonomously, develop ideas in isolation, and answer primarily to themselves or a gallery. Public art reverses this structure. Artists respond to parameters set by clients, work through approvals, collaborate with engineers and fabricators, and operate within bureaucratic systems. Payment happens in stages, contracts replace consignment, and artworks are experienced by people who may not be looking for art at all. Neither model is better, but they require fundamentally different mindsets. Success in public art depends as much on communication and process as on aesthetics. Contemporary public art increasingly engages with equity, environmental issues, and social justice. Artists initiate projects independently, work outside institutions, and respond directly to community needs. The field has professionalized with dedicated training programs and interdisciplinary degrees. Yet, public art remains diverse. Some artists scale up studio practices, while others reinvent themselves for each project. Public art today is not a single discipline, but a spectrum of approaches, united by shared space and public responsibility. Public art is not just about objects, it's about process, dialogue, and impact. Artists working in public space shape how people experience their cities, their communities, and each other. Public art asks artists to move beyond personal expression into shared responsibility. It demands listening, collaboration, and strategic thinking. Throughout this semester, we'll return to these ideas as we design murals, sculptures, installations, and proposals rooted in real world contexts. Public art is where art meets life, and that intersection is where this course lives.